I am Brian Hall's fiancé and his childhood sweetheart. That day, I saw him kissing his so-called good brother, another girl. I'm really annoyed with her. She's such a sickly girl and so pretentious. He complained while hugging her. His good brother chuckled. She is so pretentious because you spoiled her. I told you to set some rules for her so she won't do that anymore. If you didn't listen, who can you blame? Oh, so that's how it is. In fact, I don't necessarily need him. Later, as he wished, I left. But he seemed like a different person and said he would marry no one else but me. 1. In the evening, Brian sent me a message asking me to send the wine from home to the bar. I caught a cold yesterday, had a fever, felt dizzy, and stayed in bed for the whole day. He clearly knew all about it. I'm feeling a bit under the weather. Could you order a drink? I messaged. His phone rang. After the call was connected, there was a commotion on the other end. Be quiet. Let's see how Brian takes charge of the family. Ha ha ha. Are you willing to do that, Brian? My sister-in-law is in poor health. Amidst the noisy laughter, he asked, Have you got a meal yet? I was stunned. Have eaten. The brothers are all waiting. Why is it so hard for you to deliver something? He said in a deep voice. You have the energy to eat but not to come over? Oh. I took cold medicine and now I feel dizzy. I said in a hoarse voice. Brian, forget it, forget it. If you lose, just give the money to the brothers. It was a shrill female voice. I am very familiar with this voice. Brian's good brother, Julia Adams. She giggled. Brian is going to lose money today. His wife is disobedient again. The booing started again. I suddenly felt nauseous in my stomach. Lauren Mitchell. Brian's voice was filled with the impatience I was familiar with. I closed my eyes. Okay, I'll go now. 2. I took a taxi and arrived at the bar. When I pushed open the door, I saw Brian standing in the middle of the room, kissing Julia closely amidst the cheers. When they saw me, the noisy place suddenly became quiet. Julia sensed something strange and glanced over, screamed, "Ah!" and pushed Brian away. It was as if I saw some ferocious beast. Brian staggered a few steps after being pushed, and also looked over with a frown. He looked drunk. When I looked at her, Julia seemed to accidentally wipe her moist lips and said helplessly, Sister-in-law, don't get me wrong. We both lost the game and are being punished. My eyes swept over her cool little camisole and white miniskirt. Brian and his other buddies have praised her more than once. Pure and sexy. Oh. I walked over and put the wine on the glass table despite the headache. The wine is here. I'm leaving now. Hey, sister-in-law, don't be angry. Julia suddenly hugged my arms and rubbed her snot and tears on me. I turned around and frowned at her. The brothers present here can all vouch for Brian and me that we were just joking around. If you were to blame for this misunderstanding, we would be wrongly killed. Oh, misunderstand? I turned around and asked, Are you just joking with your brothers? With tears in her eyes, she nodded desperately. I randomly pointed at one of the boys, their other brother. Then you kiss him too. Julia's face turned pale instantly. Sister-in-law, who do you think I am? As she said this, her eyes were filled with humiliation and her eye circles were as red as a wounded little rabbit. At this time a boy stood up. Sister-in-law, brothers, let's play drinking games. Julia is a girl, don't make it difficult for her. That's right. Let's play. I turned my head and looked at everyone. Embarrassment? So you guys also know what embarrassment means? It's not embarrassment if you guys make me deliver wine despite being sick. Several people were silent, staring at each other for a while, and then looked at Brian. Brian, look at this. That's enough. I turned around and Brian came over and grabbed my arm. What's wrong with you today? I told you that we were just joking around. Why are you so persistent? You've ruined the good atmosphere. Julia is a girl. Would you deliberately embarrass her like this? Girl. His good brother turned back into a girl at this moment. I'm sorry, sister-in-law, it's my fault. At this moment, Julia was already crying. If I had known that you would quarrel, I wouldn't have insisted on drinking this wine. Oh, this wine is indeed what Julia wants to drink. My guess before coming here was confirmed, and a surge of fatigue suddenly hit my body from all directions. At this moment, I just wanted to leave this ridiculous place immediately. I shook off Brian's hand and turned away. Hey sister-in-law, don't be angry. Julia came over to pull me again, but I pushed her away. Ah! She stumbled and fell weakly into Brian's arms. Brian's anger seemed to be ignited by this fall. Lauren! Stop! He shouted from behind. I turned around and saw him holding up the aggrieved Julia, his face dark and blue. Apologize to Julia. I paused and looked calmly at the angry face. This face has shown me all kinds of expressions. Worry, love, distress, helplessness. Now, he often glares at me for his brother. If you don't apologize today, we'll be separated, he continued. At this moment, all his good brothers in the private room were looking at the three of us with an expression as if they were enjoying a good show. I felt like a monkey in a circus. Okay. I took a step forward. What? Brian frowned. Hey Brian, look at you. Julia looked at me, then patted Brian affectionately, her eyes getting redder. What are you doing? Don't embarrass your sister-in-law. What did you say? Brian asked again. I said okay. I looked at him calmly. I agree, let's go our separate ways. 3. Maybe because I was still a little dizzy, I realized my house key was not in my pocket when I got into the taxi. Maybe it fell in the bar corridor. I had to go back and look for it. Fortunately, the bartender picked it up, and when he handed me the key, the door of Brian's private room suddenly opened. Julia carried the drunk Brian to the bathroom while complaining, "Oh, come on, if you're angry with your sister-in-law, you should also take care of your health. If you don't feel sorry for yourself, there are others who do." Brian held her face with a silly smile. Tell me, why isn't she as sensible as you? She gave me a cold shoulder for giving me a bottle of wine. And she even wants to break up. Julia exclaimed. Ouch! Sister-in-law, you are really ignorant. You said you were so good to her. Other girls would be so envious of you. But she must have said it out of anger when she said she wanted to break up. How could she bear to break up with a rich second generation like you? Didn't she come back crying every time? Rich second generation money. Brian was stunned for a moment. Maybe it's just like what you said, she's after my money. Then he murmured. Actually, I am really annoyed sometimes. She is obviously a sickly person, but I don't even dislike her. But she keeps being pretentious. Brian, Julia sighed. I'm telling you the truth, don't be so naive. You've spoiled your sister-in-law. We've told you to set some rules for her so she won't dare to do that anymore. Who are you going to blame for this? Don't always think about whether your sister-in-law is after your money. Look at how your sister-in-law is holding you back. She's just after your money, and you can't bear to break up with her. So don't make yourself unhappy. As they talked, the two of them entered the bar's accessible restroom together, and with a click, the door was locked from the inside. My stomach started churning again. I turned around and left. 4. Maybe it was because I went out in the wind at night that I got a fever in the middle of the night. In a daze, I seemed to dream about the things that happened between Brian and me in the past. We both grew up together in an orphanage. I have been in poor health since I was a child, and Brian has been by my side for as long as I can remember. He would beat away other kids who bullied me, would go barefoot to find a doctor for me when I was sick, would hold my hand and say in his childish voice, Lauren, don't worry, I will take care of you for the rest of my life. Once there was a fire in the orphanage. He had been rescued, but he rushed in to save me. His shoulder was burned by the sparks, leaving a permanent scar. At that time I wondered what kind of love could be more important than one's own life. I have no parents or relatives, and Brian is the best person to me in this world. So I said to myself, Lauren, you must always be nice to Brian. When Brian was 16, his biological parents came looking for him. It turned out that he was the long-lost son of the Hall family. They took him back and he suddenly became a rich man. But he didn't forget me. He would secretly come to see me in my high school, bring me food and medicine, and make an appointment with me to apply to the same university. We actually got admitted to the same university. We were the most enviable couple in college, and it was at this time that Julia, along with a group of good brothers, appeared in Brian and I's lives. Julia is a small internet celebrity with some fame in the university town, and is known for her manly personality. She and the male friends around her seem to be brothers. The Hall family has quite a bit of business here. As someone who has seen the fickleness of life, I can tell what these brothers surrounding Brian are up to. I reminded Brian more than once, but he disagreed. On the contrary, he enjoyed the feeling of being the center of attention. After we became official friends in college, Brian introduced me to the Hall family. He knelt on the ground and told his parents that he would only marry me in this life. Brian's biological mother had a kind face. She was particularly doting on Brian but extremely strict with me. In her eyes, I, an orphan girl of unknown origin, was not worthy of the Hall family. His parents disagreed, so Brian stood in the rain at the door of the villa for the whole night. The next day he was hospitalized with pneumonia and his fever reached 40 degrees. I felt sorry for Brian, so in order to prevent him from being caught between me and his parents, I tried my best to make his mother happy. I endured her deliberate difficulties, accepted her constant criticism, and always paid attention to my words and actions so that others would not find fault with me. Over time she reluctantly accepted me, but still called me to the Hall family every weekend for what she called wife counseling. The Hall family servants were all off that day, and I was left alone to serve Brian's mother and all her friends. Serve tea, wash dishes, and hold an umbrella. You're sick because you lack exercise. Brian's mother always looked at me sweating and panting while fiddling with her newly done nails. Just work more. Her friends would look at me with scrutiny. She looks so weak, I don't know if she can have a baby. Brian's mother, you should take her to get checked out. You have no family background and can't have children, so you're at a loss. In the Hall family I am like a commodity, always being scrutinized, pointed at and commented on by these condescending eyes. I didn't tell Brian all this because I felt sorry for how hard he had to work to take over the company, and I didn't want him to worry about my relationship with his family. And these are really nothing. As long as Brian loves me, protects me, and stands firmly with me as always, all these grievances are nothing. After graduating from college, I got a good job offer. The Hall family wouldn't let me go. That time Brian and I had a big fight. He said I was too willful. Don't you know what your own body is like? He was furious. I just don't understand. My family allowed you to stay at home and enjoy being Mrs. Hall after graduation. What are you dissatisfied with? Lauren, why are you always so selfish? I have tried so hard to get my family to accept you. Why can't you understand and be considerate of me? He started to cry as he spoke. That year I risked my life to save you. Couldn't you compromise for me a little bit? So I compromised again. Because he saved my life, because he has been so good to me, because he is the only light in my life. Whenever I think of him who risked everything and even his life for me, whenever I see the scar on his shoulder from saving me, no matter how fierce the quarrel is, I will find a reason to reconcile with him. I don't ask for anything else, I just hope we can go on together for a long time. And it wasn't until today that I understood. It turned out that he thought I didn't leave him because I couldn't bear to part with his money. He really annoys me. This kind of deliberate probing has actually happened more than once today. The reason why I went to deliver the wine was probably to make myself feel relieved and give in to the final straw. In the dream, tears could not stop flowing. The sunny boy in my memory seemed to be standing behind me. He waved his hands and shouted to me happily, "Lauren, wait for me. Let's go together." But I didn't want to go with him anymore. I'm so tired. I let the tears flow and flow as I moved forward step by step. Until the sunset, when I looked back again. The figure in my memory has long been washed away by tears and disappeared. There is no trace of its existence anymore. 5. When I woke up the next day, my fever was gone. Although I was exhausted, I opened my suitcase and started packing. At this moment, the door of the apartment opened and Julia's voice came through the bedroom door. "Brian, we're going to watch Slam Dunk this afternoon. We agreed to go together. I'll be wearing the Shahoku uniform," Brian said. My hands paused as I packed my clothes. Today was the day Brian agreed to go with me to meet my biological parents. A week ago, someone from the welfare home contacted me and said that my biological parents might have been found. The other party asked me to provide hair for DNA identification first. And today is the day when the results come out. When I first received the notice, I was very nervous and anxious, and Brian promised to accompany me. But just a few days later, he forgot about it and went to see Slam Dunk with others. Creaky, the bedroom door opened. "It's Brian. What are you doing? Why are you being so willful?" He frowned as he looked at me as I was packing my things. Don't you know the condition of your body? I don't have time to travel with you now. You don't have to accompany me. I said softly. We broke up last night and I'm moving out today. Hee. He was stunned for a moment, then suddenly laughed. Lauren, they all say that I spoiled you too much, but I didn't think so before. But what about now? Look at what you have become. You always threaten to break up? Are you sure I can't leave you? He squatted down and pulled my hand away from me, packing my luggage with disgust. That's enough. Weren't you impressive enough last night? You're using the gift of wine to embarrass me in front of my brothers and deliberately embarrass Julia. Are you still not satisfied? A sudden rush of air surged in my chest, and I raised my head and looked at him. Brian, first, I told you I was not feeling well, but you insisted that I bring you some wine. Second, you were the one who kissed Julia first and she was the one who came over and talked to me first. Third, you were the one who said we should break up. I shook his hand off and zipped up the suitcase. I never believed that you couldn't leave me, and I didn't believe that I couldn't leave you. Is this funny to you? He raised his voice. You make trouble every day by taking advantage of your poor health. Do I owe you something? He started to get angry. Lauren, don't you know whether I'm good to you or not? I risked my life for you. I just asked you to bring me some wine last night to see how sincere you are to me, and it turned out to be true. He grabbed my arm and said, Do you know what my brothers say about you in private? They say you are a gold digger and I am a fool. You are after my money. Can't you prove that you are not? But what have you done? I have given so much for you. What have you done for me? What's wrong with me wanting to verify it myself? I remained silent, and he became even angrier. I really fell in love with the wrong person. You really want to break up, right? I won't keep you, so let's break up. You'd better think carefully before you walk out of this door. The position of daughter-in-law of the Hall family will not be reserved for everyone forever. I raised my head and looked into his eyes, which were lifeless due to hangover. In the past, through these eyes I saw a beautiful past, mutual support, sweet love and a promising future. Now all I can see is desolation. Brian, you did it, I whispered. What? He was stunned. Brian, you finally made it. You have successfully made me sick of this relationship and have successfully made me stop loving you. 6. I left the apartment. Brian didn't follow. I hadn't rented a new house yet and I didn't have a job. I spent half a day in the KFC on the corner, putting on some light makeup to cover up my slightly swollen eyes from crying all night. Just now the DNA test results came out. In the evening, I will meet my biological parents. Brian once said that parents who abandoned me as soon as I was born either disliked girls or had bad character. Now he is looking for his relatives, maybe because he knows the relationship between him and me, and wants to take advantage of the Hall family's money and resources. But now that Brian and I have broken up, I don't know if they will be disappointed when they see me. I actually don't know what family is. Brian once said that he is my family, and his family is my family. But I only felt tired and tormented by these so-called family members. Today's sunset is beautiful, with clouds rolling in the sky, coated with a layer of warm golden light. I sat by the window watching the sun slowly set, and finally picked up my suitcase and walked out of KFC. 7. The agreed location was a hotel not far away. I was pulling a heavy suitcase and was about to cross the road when an electric bike suddenly came speeding towards me in the distance. In an instant I couldn't dodge in time and was pulled hard from behind by someone, and I and the box were turned around. An electric bike sped past me, brushing against the edge of my skirt. Are you okay? The voice of my rescuer sounded above my head. This is a nice and magnetic male voice. I shook my head and quickly thanked him. It's okay. There are a lot of electric cars in this area. Be careful when walking or driving. He smiled but was stunned the moment he saw my face clearly. You are you? Lauren. I was also stunned. I'm Lauren, your cousin's brother-in-law, he smiled. Your face looks like Aunt Elizabeth's. Do you still need DNA? The Perez family is afraid of being cheated, so they are too cautious. But there have been many scammers who have undergone plastic surgery and come here to look for relatives, but there's nothing we can do about it, he sighed. Let's go. He enthusiastically pulled up my suitcase. There are many people under Perez and they are talkative. So we are meeting at Reed's Hotel today to protect you. I have cleared all the people, don't worry. You said, Mr. Prith. Mr. Reed. He thought about it and said, ah. You forgot, you don't know yet, he smiled. You are the only daughter of the second son of the Perez group. I'm Samuel Reed from the Reed group. My sister married your cousin, so our two families are in-laws. 8. Perez Reed. Before I could react, I had already followed Samuel to the entrance of the hotel. A group of people were standing at the door, looking anxiously in our direction. At this moment, a beautiful lady rushed over and hugged me. Is it Lauren? Is it my Lauren? She held my face in her hands, crying uncontrollably. It's really my child, Brother Sue, our child is back. A tall man came up from behind, his eyes reddened. Yes, our child is back. I looked at the face in front of me that looked 70% like me, and my eyes felt sore unconsciously. Uncle Daniel, Aunt Elizabeth, please go in first. Samuel whispered. Until we entered the VIP lounge, my biological mother held my hand tightly. I could feel that her hands were shaking slightly. Today, the director of the welfare home and the police are also here. Together, they recounted the process of finding me. It turns out that after Elizabeth Peterson gave birth to me, she hired a nanny named Jessica Mitchell. Elizabeth was sick for some time after giving birth to me. Seeing that Elizabeth was in poor health, Jessica actually took advantage of her own beauty and tried to seduce my biological father, Daniel Perez. Daniel didn't fall for it, and Jessica was furious and sneaked back after being fired and stole me away. Technology at that time was not as advanced as it is now. Even though the Perez family was rich, they searched for Jessica for a long time but could not find her. It was not until half a year later that the police found Jessica and her baby's clothes, shoes, and socks, as well as a suicide note she had left behind, on an undeveloped beach. The suicide note said that since she couldn't get Daniel, she wanted him to never forget her. So she died with his child. The police later found Jessica's body in the sea, but they never found mine. They thought maybe I had been eaten by fish. Over the years, even though most people assumed I was dead, my parents never gave up. Daniel and Elizabeth never had another child. They held on to a glimmer of hope, searching and waiting. But Jessica didn't actually kill me back then. Perhaps it was the last bit of kindness in her heart, or maybe she wanted to satisfy some of her own desires in a bad way. But she left me at the door of an orphanage in the next county and left a note saying that my name was Lauren and that my mother could not raise a child because she got pregnant before marriage. Mitchell, that's her last name. Later, the orphanage caught fire and all of us children were sent to an orphanage in Haicheng. But because my origins were recorded and my biological mother's surname was Mitchell, naturally no one would have ever thought that I would be the daughter of the Perez family who died shortly after birth. For so many years my biological parents and I lived in the same city, but we had never seen each other. Until recently, Samuel, the president of a charity project of Reed, chatted with my former welfare home director and talked about the fire that year. The dean dug out a group photo of the children from that year, and Samuel discovered that I in the photo looked like Elizabeth when she was a child star. He was suspicious and told the Perez family about it. Over the years, the Perez family has experienced too many scammers who came to claim their relatives. Some even bribed the hospital to forge DNA reports just to inherit Daniel and Elizabeth's huge inheritance 100 years later. So they were as nervous as I was about this family reunion, but they didn't dare to hold out any hope. Although he couldn't wait to see me, he had been holding back until now, for I was afraid that the greater the hope, the greater the disappointment. 9. In the evening, I went home with my parents. My uncle and cousin's family were also there. My mother held my hand and asked softly, Lauren, we heard from the director of the orphanage that you are dating the young master of the Hall family. Is that right? I was stunned. Mom and Dad didn't mean anything else, she said quickly. Although Hall's is much worse than ours, if you like it, Mom and Dad will support it. I shook my head. Dad, Mom, he and I have broken up. My father asked me what I wanted to do next, and whether I was willing to learn how to manage a company. I hesitated. I don't have any work experience. I'm afraid I don't have the ability. I lowered my head. Lauren just came back. Why are you in such a hurry? My mother complained immediately. That night, I slept with my mother. I am a light sleeper and I knew she woke up many times in the middle of the night, gently touching my hair and sobbing softly several times. The next morning, my father personally made breakfast for me. He watched me eat with red eyes and asked me cautiously if it was my taste. During these few days back home, I felt family affection and love that I had never experienced before. They are all trying their best to make it up to me, but I know that they may have suffered more than I have over the years. A few days later, my cousin Matthew Perez came to see me, and Samuel was there too. Matthew said, "My father's health has not been very good in recent years. The mental torture for me and the work pressure over the years were like two huge mountains pressing down on him. The doctor had long ago suggested that he retire and rest. In fact, I had already noticed the clue from his graying temples. Although he was 5 years younger than my uncle, he looked much older than him." Lauren Perez now has two major business units. One is with me and the other is with my second uncle. Sooner or later, my second uncle's part will be handed over to you. Matthew asked me, "Are you willing to learn?" I lowered my head, thought for a long time and finally nodded. "I'm willing to give it a try." Matthew breathed a sigh of relief and Samuel, who had been silent until then, suddenly interrupted. "I think it's not a good idea to leave her directly with Perez." Matthew looked up. "Why is it bad? The Perez family are all very smart people. She looks so much like Aunt Elizabeth. Do you think people can guess her identity? On the one hand, there are rumors. On the other hand, such working and interpersonal relationships are not conducive to her learning." Matthew frowned slightly. "You do make sense then. Help people to the end and send them off to the West." Samuel smiled. He came over and said, "If you really want to learn corporate management, how about coming to me?" "Me? Huh." He blinked and said, "We, the Reed family, are no smaller than the Perez family. 10. So, after getting my parents' consent, I went to work at Reed's. Didn't you say you were going to the sales department?" On my first day at work, I stood in Samuel's huge office, staring at my temporary work badge in a daze. It clearly says President's Office on it. What can I learn in the business department? Samuel was signing documents. "What you need to learn is how to run a company," he said. "So what? Of course I have to learn from the best teacher." "The best teacher? Who?" I was a little confused. He looked up from a pile of papers and grinned at me. "Of course it's me." 11. Samuel is a man who looks like a dandy at first glance. He loves cars and collects all kinds of luxury cars. He even built a garage in his home for this purpose and participated in racing competitions. He also loves sports and plays basketball for at least an hour every night at the company's basketball court. Years of exercise habits have given him a good figure, with broad shoulders, narrow waist and straight long legs. I heard that many female employees volunteered to work overtime just to watch him play. But after getting along for a long time, you will find that these are just appearances. He is a very good manager. After I became his assistant, I followed him in negotiations, met with guests and attended meetings. He looks casual, but he can often hit the opponent's weaknesses while chatting and laughing. He seems careless about many things, but he always has the overall situation in control and handles things with ease. Unlike my serious cousin Matthew, he rarely works overtime. Apart from normal business dinners, he rarely drinks or parties and doesn't smoke. After tense negotiations, he would take time to review the entire process with me, simulate different situations, and let me think of response plans on my own. They would also try to get me to write a meeting outline before the meeting and point out what the key points should be. He has sharp observation skills and would let me go back to rest as soon as I showed any sign of sleepiness. At the beginning I said I could hold on. "No need. Why should we persist if we are tired?" He laughed. "A philosopher once said that we should rest in order to go a longer way." "Who is it?" I widened my eyes. He blinked. I forgot his name, but I think he makes a lot of sense. Being with Samuel is a relaxed and comfortable experience, but it also provides hidden tips and insights. He never puts pressure on others, but is very good at guiding them. The heart that had been tense and troubled for years seemed to become relaxed because of his influence. Being with him, I have indeed learned a lot and grown very fast. But at the same time, his brilliance also made me doubt myself. Can I really do it? Can I really do this? Soon, a month passed in busyness. At noon that day, I unexpectedly met Brian and Julia in Reed's Mall. Samuel's birthday is next week, and I want to help him pick out a birthday present as a thank you for helping me. But in fact, he has everything he needs, even this shopping mall belongs to him. After much deliberation, I finally chose a red knotted rope for blessing that I needed to weave by myself. After all, it's a token of my heart. As I passed by several luxury goods counters, I suddenly heard Julia's voice. Buy this perfume for Auntie. She will definitely like it. There were too few people in the mall at noon, and the sound of high heels stepping on the ground was too obvious. When I turned around, the two people next to the counter had seen me at the same time. Brian looked listless, but a gleam of light seemed to flash across his eyes the moment he saw me. Lauren. Julia glanced at Brian, then at the bag I was carrying, and immediately came over with a smile. Sister-in-law, are you here to buy a birthday present for Auntie too? She exclaimed. Your gift? Listen to me, this kind of gift won't work. Buy something higher end, Auntie will like it. Brian raised his chin slightly when he heard Julia's words. Where have you been for the past month? He frowned. Don't think I'll forgive you just because you made a rope. As he spoke, his eyes fell on my work badge. What is this? The president's office. The temporary worker's badge didn't have a name on it. Julia read the words on my badge word by word, and smiled with her hands covering her mouth. Sister-in-law, why are you working as a receptionist at Reed's? A temporary worker. Brian's frown deepened. I know where I work, so don't worry about me. I said calmly and turned to leave. Sister-in-law, what you said is not right. Why are you still upset? Julia came forward and held me, looking up at Brian with heartache. You can't ignore Brian even if you are angry. Just then Brian said, Julia, wait for me over there. Julia was stunned for a moment and walked away reluctantly. Brian came over and snatched the gift box from my hand. What's the point of being a receptionist? Don't you think you're bringing shame to the family? He said angrily. Stop making trouble and move back here right away. Mom is mad because you haven't been back for so long. Mom asked me several times, saying that you didn't answer the phone or go home. I told her that you were not feeling well recently and she didn't say anything. Do you have to make the situation so out of control before you're satisfied? If then Mom won't let you in, how are you going to save the situation? Do you think she'll forgive you just because you made a worthless red string? Brian. I snatched the box back and interrupted him coldly. We broke up. How many times do you want me to say it again? The red string was prepared by me for someone else. It has nothing to do with your mother. But he still held my hand tightly. Why are you being so stubborn? How could this be such a coincidence? Let me go. Lauren. I turned around and saw Samuel coming over with another assistant. Brian was stunned when he saw Samuel. You are Reed's. Mr. Reed. Samuel turned his head and looked at him indifferently. Who are you? I'm Brian from Hall. Brian hurriedly handed over his business card. My parents contacted you before, wanting to cooperate with Reed in daily necessities and become your distributor. Our bidding for this year has ended, Samuel said politely with a smile. If your company is interested, you can bid again next year. Mr. Reed, could you please consider our company again? Brian was flustered. My parents know that you like cars and want to invite you. Mr. Hall, Samuel interrupted him, my personal preferences have nothing to do with company decisions. Aye. Mr. Reed, your company's receptionist Lauren is Mr. Hall's girlfriend. Julia came over at some point and suddenly screamed. Everyone was stunned. Brian frowned doubtfully and looked at Julia, who stepped forward and said with a smile, Mr. Reed, Mr. Hall is indeed sincere. In order to impress you, he let Ms. Lauren work as the receptionist of your company. It depends on whether you can give Mr. Hall a chance, right, Ms. Lauren? Samuel was stunned and looked at me. It's the ex-girlfriend. I corrected. Mr. Reed. Brian realized Julia's intention and smiled immediately. Lauren is joking with you. We haven't broken up. She even came here today to buy my mom a birthday present. Lauren doesn't know many things, so please forgive us if we have caused you any trouble. But we really want to make friends with you. For so many years, Reed has not cooperated with Hall, and we all feel it's a pity. I'm not asking about ex-girlfriends and ex-boyfriends. Samuel ignored him and turned to ask me, when did you become my receptionist? Before I could say anything, Julia interrupted me and said, Sister Lauren, how come this is still fake? Forged work ID, this. Brian's face also gradually turned darker. Mr. Reed, I just want to. I know what Mr. Hall means. Let's talk about cooperation, right? Samuel waved his hand. Then talk to my assistant. Brian showed surprise. Okay. Then your assistant is. My assistant. Samuel looked at me. Since you two already know each other, I won't introduce you. After that, he reminded. But she is very busy, remember to make an appointment in advance. 12. When Samuel and I left, Brian and Julia were still standing there. Like being struck by lightning. Why do you want me to talk? I asked after explaining my relationship with Brian to him. He hesitated for a moment and said, I heard from Matthew that Aunt Elizabeth wanted to give you the golf club owned by Perez, but you didn't want it. I nodded. Perez Golf Club is actually a gathering place for local ladies in Haicheng. There is a certain threshold for joining. My mother has always been the president of the club. Those ladies are very cunning. I'm a little worried that I can't handle them. He pondered for a moment. So let's take this opportunity to train a little. I'm asking you to work with Hall for 2 reasons. First, I want you to practice. I've seen the materials Hall submitted before. The packaging is very good. But there are some hidden flaws. You can take this opportunity to see if you can spot them. Just treat it as a small test for us. Second, isn't Brian your ex-boyfriend? So what? I didn't quite understand. You know what? You and my sister are a lot like each other. He sighed softly. Girls are always used to giving too much in relationships without realizing it, and end up getting hurt too much. I don't know why you broke up, but judging from what he did just now, he probably isn't a very considerate boyfriend. So I fully authorize you to meet him if you want to, and not if you don't want to. If you can detach yourself from your emotions and negotiate with your ex-boyfriend, then nothing else will be difficult for you in the future. Of course, if you can't detach yourself from your emotions, you can embarrass him as much as you want. It's up to you. Is this okay? I widened my eyes. You are being partial to me by giving me this authorization? What's wrong with that? He chuckled. Didn't Matthew tell you that I'm a person who always helps my relatives instead of others? I thought about it. Am I just taking advantage of the power of the other side? Do you think I'm raising a fox? He asked with a raised eyebrow. I'm raising a tiger cub. A few days later, Brian made an appointment and sat opposite me with a grim look on his face. I actually didn't want to embarrass him. Just like Samuel said, it was a valuable practical experience to detach from emotions. In a businesslike manner, I communicated with him about the problems in the materials, but he suddenly interrupted me. How did you become Samuel's assistant? I was silent for a moment, then said calmly, Mr. Hall, we are discussing business matters. What did you betray? He raised his voice. What? I was stunned. It's hard for even fresh graduates from top 985 universities to get into Reed's junior positions. You haven't had a job since graduation, so how could you suddenly be hired as his assistant? His eyes were red and he grabbed me and said, I tried so hard to save you and protected and loved you for so many years, just to let you warm the bed for another man? Let go. I frowned. I won't let go. He grabbed me stubbornly and pulled me into his arms. Have you forgotten? You are mine, you have always been mine. How did Samuel get you? Did he save you? He's just a little richer than me. Lauren, look carefully, he has all the women he wants. He's just playing with you. When you get tired of playing with me, you'll be thrown away like trash. There's no other man in the world who can treat you better than me. Wake up. Brian. Let go. We'll quit our jobs now, and we'll get married after Mom's birthday. The worst that can happen is that we'll offend Reed, but we won't do business with him anymore. Brian. I shook his hand off. He turned his head, his eyes were red. I really love you, why don't you understand? I looked at him calmly. We've broken up, why don't you understand? What breakup? We just had a fight. I shook my head. Brian. It's not that you don't understand, you're just used to it. Over the years, every time we broke up, I would come back to you. But this time it's different. I handed the document back to him. I've written down Hall's business problems here. I'm afraid they won't meet Reed's requirements. The same goes for us. I can't go back. I just can't go back. 14. After Brian left, I sat alone in the conference room for a long time. The 3 words, "I can't go back," spoken out loud in person were just as damaging to me as they were to him. The person I once admired and loved so much has finally come to this point today. The phone vibrated. It was a message from Brian. "I know I was wrong. I was wrong to ask you to bring me some wine that day because I was drunk. It was only later that I found the antipyretic medicine on your bedside that I realized you really had a fever. Lauren, I don't care what happened between you and Samuel during this time. As long as you come back, I want you. Come back. If you ignore me, I will still look for you, and keep looking for you until you change your mind. Lauren, after so many years of relationship, there is no way you can let me go." Finally, he sent a photo. It's the scar on his shoulder. I suddenly felt very annoyed, as if my heart was blocked by a ball of water-soaked cotton. The feeling of being unable to breathe that I used to have came back again. I blacklisted Brian. As the sun sets, the lights outside the floor-to-ceiling windows come on, creating a bustling scene. "So you are here?" The door opened and I turned around. It was Samuel. He walked up to me and said, "I heard you met with Brian today? Did the conversation go badly?" I nodded. "Well, I was just trying to be businesslike, but my emotions got in the way." "That's normal. You've done a good job." He nodded. "After all, humans are not robots. But as a manager, many people will try to influence your emotions and decisions. This is a hurdle you must overcome." "I know. But if your brother knew that you were in a bad mood because of the work I arranged for you, he would probably want to kill me." He smiled and walked to the door. "So, for the sake of my life, today's work is over. Next, Brother Samuel will take you out to play." 15. Samuel got 2 bicycles from somewhere. He took me on a bike ride on a summer night, traveling through the streets and alleys and eating all kinds of street food. Everywhere I went, I was like a little animal being fed. Stinky tofu, fish cakes, fried cakes, chicken skewers. The cool night breeze blew my hair. I looked at Samuel, who was watching me eat with his chin in his hand. I couldn't help asking, "Why do I feel like you don't have any worries?" How can I not have some?" He smiled and helped me put my stray hair behind my ears. "I have a lot of worries." He talked about how he had just taken over Reed. You know what? During my inaugural speech, my palms were sweaty and I felt my voice was shaking. The board of directors were all my grandfather's generation, and they were all very shrewd. I was very anxious at the time, hoping to be recognized by everyone. I even dreamed about the meeting in the middle of the night. What happened next? Later I realized that I didn't really need their approval. You just need to be yourself, please yourself, and they will naturally surrender. But there is a limit to one's ability. I lowered my head. I have never been good at socializing since I was a child. Because I was weak, I always stayed alone. Samuel and I are different. He was strictly trained according to the standards of Reed's successor since he was a child, but I have been an ordinary person for more than 20 years. He shook his head. "No, you can do it. Would you like to try it?" he asked. Samuel took me to a lighted basketball court. Just the 2 of us. I had never played basketball and had never been good at sports, but he said he wanted to teach me how to shoot. Like this, raise your hands, come on. He patiently corrected my movements over and over again, with an attitude as serious as a real coach. "Why do you like playing ball?" I couldn't help but wonder. "Because he's good at playing basketball," he said, helping me adjust my posture. "Have you ever seen Slam Dunk?" I shook my head. In the past, I always thought that the male protagonists in anime and idol dramas were all very good at playing basketball, so I practiced very hard and imagined myself as one of them. But later, playing ball became my most direct way to relieve stress. The thrilling confrontation and exciting competition often make you forget other worries and focus on the present. I tried to throw the ball again and bang! It actually went in. I couldn't help but cheer happily and high-fived him. "So, basketball became a sport I had to do every day," he continued with a smile. "But it was no longer my original intention to become an idol actor. After all, my name is not very popular in idol dramas." "What's your name?" He threw the ball to me. When I was born, I loved crying all the time. My mother wanted me to be stronger, so she gave me the name Lay. Where's hard?" I blurted out without thinking while patting the ball. He was stunned. I was also stunned. There was a cool breeze and I was holding the basketball, but suddenly I felt like I was holding a hot coal. After a while, he chuckled and asked, "Can you drive?" "I'm not driving," I retorted immediately. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. I said I was driving my car. The drinks I bought at the basketball court just now contained alcohol. My face suddenly turned red. "Lauren, you should just crawl into the cracks in the ground on this basketball court." "I can, but I've rarely driven it," I stammered. Brian used to say that I was in poor health and wouldn't let me drive. When I thought about Brian, I suddenly realized that I haven't thought about him since I came out with Samuel. 16. Samuel asked his driver to drive the car over and took me to a drive-in cinema in the suburbs. The movie playing in the theater was Slam Dunk. When I was a kid, I liked Sakuragi Hanamichi the most, and I still like him now. After watching the movie, he said softly, "Many people have different opinions about this movie and don't understand why Miyagi was chosen as the protagonist. I actually feel a little regretful, but I understand the author. Each of us hopes to become a genius like Sakuragi, but most people, like Miyagi, start out as ordinary people and work hard to rise to the top. As long as you stay true to yourself and don't give up, you will have the chance to score the winning goal. Even if I didn't score a goal, as long as I played, I have no regrets, right?" The ending song was playing on the big screen, and I suddenly understood what he meant. "Thank you for today," I whispered. I am actually a very sensitive and careful person, and I realized long ago that everything that seemed casual tonight was carefully prepared by him. In order for me to regain my confidence, get out of the emotional predicament, and get out of the cage I have woven for myself. "You are too easily moved, little fool. You will be deceived by men if you keep doing this." "I'm thanking you. Why are you ruining the atmosphere?" I widened my eyes and said angrily, "I think you care about my affairs, so." He raised an eyebrow. A gust of wind blew and the leaves rustled. He opened his mouth to say something else, but I didn't hear it clearly. "It's okay. I only care about the ones I like." 17. The next day, I told my mother that I was willing to take over the golf club. "I want to try it." My mother was very happy and quickly arranged everything. That day at the club, Assistant James said there was someone outside the door looking for me. Yes, that lady heard from somewhere that the lady had handed the club over to the young lady, so she came with gifts and insisted on seeing the young lady. I frowned. After walking out, sure enough, it was Brian's mother. She was holding a box in her hand, and her ingratiating smile disappeared the moment she saw me. "Lauren, what are you doing here?" She widened her eyes. "Julia told me a few days ago that you were trying to get high up in Reed's family, but I didn't believe it. Which weirdo are you here with? I've long told my son that you're not a good person," she sneered, picking up her camera to take pictures. "Now I've caught you red-handed. Don't think you can get membership in this club just by following a man. This club is very difficult to get into, and not just anyone can." I looked at her quietly, sat at the tea table, and poured myself a cup of tea. "It's true that we don't accept just any cat or dog. Otherwise you wouldn't have submitted 10 applications and all were rejected." Brian's mother. "What did you say?" She raised her hands in frustration. "Lauren, I'm telling you, if you want to enter the Hall family with your current behavior, I will never agree." "Enter the Hall family's door?" I drank my tea slowly. "Mother Brian, you should think about why you can't enter this clubhouse, right? You." Just then, James came over with Brian's mother's application materials. "It's James." Brian's mother immediately smiled. "Has Miss Perez not come out yet?" James looked at me, then at Brian's mother. "Isn't this our Miss Perez?" "What?" Her smile froze on her lips. She looked at me, then at James. "James likes to joke around now too." "Am I kidding you?" James was puzzled. "Our lady is very busy today, but she specially took time out to interview you. Miss," she turned to ask me, "do you need any other information?" "No need." I threw the documents on the table and stood up. "The interview is over." Wait a minute." After a while, Brian's mother seemed to realize something and suddenly caught up with me, grabbing my sleeve. "Lauren." She forced a smile and said, "Look at this misunderstanding. The flood washed away the Dragon King temple. It turns out that we are all one family." I pulled my hand out of hers and said, "Mother Brian, You have forgotten that you just said that you would never allow me to enter the Hall family. Oh my, what are you talking about? We have been together for such a long time. I have already regarded you as my own daughter. I'm sorry. A cold voice sounded from behind. My daughter doesn't plan to go around looking for her mother yet. I turned around and asked, Mom. My mother came over gracefully, but her whole body was filled with coldness. Brian's mother, right? My daughter's ex-boyfriend's mother. The one who asked my daughter to come to our house every week to serve tea and water in the past few years. You are you, right? Brian's mother was stunned. Misunderstanding, all misunderstanding. I regarded Lauren as my daughter-in-law. No matter who my Perez daughter marries, she won't serve tea or water. My mother was a head taller than Brian's mother. At this moment she looked down at her like a queen. Of course, if this is the custom of the Hall family, and Brian's mother is willing to come to the club every day to hold an umbrella and serve tea and water, I can consider letting you become a junior member based on your performance. Brian's mother hesitated and finally ran away with the gift. Check the ladies who were on good terms with her to see if they have any memberships in our club. If so, cancel them all. After my mother gave the instructions, she turned around and hugged me tightly. Lauren, it's all Mom's fault. I wish I had found you a few years earlier. It's Mom who made you suffer. I shook my head and hugged her tightly. In fact, I have already obtained the most precious thing in the world. After all, what could be more precious than your family who will stand by you unconditionally at all times? Those distant people and things are no longer important. I just hope that I can grow up soon and become their support in the future. 18. Because I was busy with the golf club, I hadn't been to Reed's for 2 weeks. After having lunch with my mother that day, I went to Reed's. When I went over, I found that everyone in the president's office was whispering. Lauren, you don't know yet, Sophia whispered to me, but we're all talking about the dispatch. Didn't we need to sort out the files a few days ago? So we hired a few temporary employees from the outsourcing company. One of the female employees was amazing. She ran to the president's office when she had nothing to do. She was wearing cool clothes, which made the driver stare at her. That's not all. This woman keeps getting close to Reed all the time, running to his office with a cup of coffee whenever she wants. The problem is that Reed seems to really fall for her. She clicked her tongue twice. I thought Reed never had a girlfriend, so his taste must be different. It seems he is not immune to this. At this moment, the door of the president's office opened. Sophia made a hug gesture to me and pointed her lips over there. Samuel came out first, followed by Julia, who looked shy. Seeing me, Samuel waved and said, Lauren, it's a good thing you're here. Let's go have dinner with the client. I was silent for a moment and walked forward. Julia glanced at me and quickly took a few steps forward, standing next to Samuel. There was no sound along the way. Only the cheerful footsteps of Julia's high heels could be heard. Arriving at the hotel's private room, Julia sat next to Samuel as usual and said in a sweet voice, Mr. Reed, can we order some king crab later? Samuel smiled and said, We'll order some dishes when the guests arrive. At this moment, the door opened and Julia and I were both stunned. It's Brian. Julia. Brian saw that Julia was also surprised. Why are you here? Julia was stunned for a moment, but was immediately interrupted by Samuel. Serve the food. The TV in the private room suddenly turned on. The scene is in Samuel's office, and Julia is politely placing a cup of coffee in front of him. Aren't you Mr. Hall's friend? Actually, Hall and I were not close. He was the one who was pursuing me, but I didn't agree. After all, Lauren and he were a couple and I would never be a third party. Besides, I didn't like him either. Mr. Reed, I don't really approve of Brian's character. I felt really bad when he kept pestering you at the mall last time. Hall still has some core technologies. Didn't they apply for a patent for a confidential technology not long ago? Samuel said indifferently. Mr. Reed. Julia leaned over. Actually, if you're interested in Hall's technology, I can help you. The picture ends here. Samuel threw a sealed envelope across the table. I haven't opened the envelope yet, so I don't know if it's real or not. Actually, this technology, to be honest, is very easy for Reed to do, but we are not interested in it. He touched the red string I gave him and said slowly, If Miss Adams was sent to me by President Hall on purpose, then I admire President Hall's courage. But President Hall probably doesn't know me very well. I'm really not interested in this kind of beauty. If Miss Adams was not sent by President Hall, then I would also admire President Hall's courage. He can give you everything you need to make a living. I really can't do that, and I can't compare to him. Brian clutched the envelope tightly and finally managed to utter a few words. I didn't send her to Reed's. Thank you, Reed, for returning the envelope today. No need to thank me, I'll just owe you a favor. You, as the president, how could you do such a thing as recording a video? Julia's voice trembled. Samuel laughed. What? You don't even know who I am, or what equipment is in my office, and you dare to come and talk to me. Besides, my mom taught me since I was a kid that I should never drink anything served by a stranger. He turned to Brian with a half-smile. Okay, I've said everything I need to say, Mr. Hall. I don't care how you and your brother resolve the situation later, but you should listen to advice and eat your fill. I suggest you be cautious in making friends in the future. Julia turned her face stiffly to Brian. Brian, I'm not. Shut up. Brian's voice trembled slightly with anger. Samuel stood up and pulled me out. Mr. Reed, you were deceived by her, you know that? Julia stood up suddenly and screamed. Lauren is a woman with ulterior motives. She cheated Brian's money before. And now she cheated you. You were bewitched by her. You are a big victim, you know that. Samuel paused and chuckled. Yeah. He looked back. If it's her, then I'd really like it. Julia looked at him in disbelief, and at this moment Brian's phone suddenly rang. Mom, I'll tell you later. What? Who are Lauren's parents? He turned to look at me blankly, and his hand holding the phone began to tremble slightly. After hanging up the phone, he seemed to be still in a trance. No, that's impossible. My mom said you're the daughter of the Perez family, but Lauren, isn't your last name Mitchell? Perez daughter? The daughter that the Perez family found and is said to be taking over half of the Perez family's assets. Julia was stunned at the same time. I must be mistaken, her last name is Mitchell. My last name is no longer Mitchell, I said calmly. My last name is Perez. Lauren. 19. After leaving the private room, I could still vaguely hear Julia's crying and the two of them arguing. There seemed to be the sound of cups breaking. I frowned and called the hotel manager. Go over and check what was damaged and ask them to pay for it. In the afternoon, Samuel accompanied me to the 4S store to pick up the car. I bought an SUV. Matthew and Emily came too. You've taken my sister wild, Matthew said to Samuel with a smile. No girl can drive this car. She chose it herself, okay? Samuel raised his eyebrows. I'm just a sparring partner at best. In the evening, the Perez family hosted a business dinner, the main purpose of which was to introduce me to the Haiching business community. Everything was going smoothly, but when it came to the media interview session, there was suddenly a commotion at the door. It's Brian's mom. She said Brian committed suicide. I beg you, Miss Perez, Brian saved you with his life. She rushed in and knelt in front of me in front of all the reporters. You can't just recognize your relationship with the rich family and abandon him. He has loved you for so many years. If you don't want him, he will really die. Brian's mother burst into tears, reporters took photos, and the scene was in chaos. In the lounge, the family and Samuel were all there. Lauren, don't worry, you don't need to go to the hospital. Your parents will help you, said my dad. We've informed the media that no photos will be released today, Matthew said. Lauren is tired after a day, why not take a rest first? I raised my eyes and met Samuel's gaze, who was sitting opposite me. I shook my head. Dad, brother, since I'm going to take over Perez's business, I shouldn't always rely on you to solve problems. I started this, so I'm here to end it myself. 20. Even so, my family insisted on accompanying me to the hospital. In the ward, Brian was lying on the bed with a pale face. When he saw me, he grabbed my wrist. Lauren, he cried. I knew you would come, you wouldn't let me go. Brian, you said you couldn't leave me. Was it because of the Perez family's money? He was stunned. What did you say? He seemed to have suffered a great injustice. How could you think of me like this, Lauren? How could my feelings for you be related to the Perez family's money? So you also know that saying this will hurt others? The air was silent. He suddenly became at a loss. Lauren, I pried open his fingers one by one. Brian, I'm here to make you realize that there is really no chance for you and me to be together anymore. Do you know why I often feel short of breath over the years? He looked at me blankly. Because I always feel suffocated in this relationship. Suffocated by the pressure-filled love and liking, suffocated by those doubts and temptations, suffocated by countless moments of disappointment and despair, suffocated by those endless internal frictions, suffocated by the weak and unwilling self. Don't you understand? I used to tell myself that everything you did was for my own good. But love is not about confinement, nor about repaying a favor, nor is it about being full of doubt. True love does not require testing or equal returns, but unreserved trust and willing dedication. When you doubted our relationship because of a few words from others, when you maintained a relationship with another girl even though you knew it was ambiguous, when you repeatedly blamed my fault for the breakdown of our relationship, we were over. That's why we couldn't be together in the end. So you've wanted to break up with me for a long time, right? His voice was filled with tears. I know you don't like me that much, but I like you so much. I like you more than my life. Yes. Brian's mother suddenly rushed in and cried. My son saved you. Who else in the world could treat you better than him? You can't be so heartless. My dad and uncle walked up and stopped Brian's mom. Brian, you always say that you saved Lauren's life, but we retrieved the relevant records from that year and found that you did rush in. But as soon as you entered, you met the 2 firefighters who had already rescued Lauren. Lauren was unconscious at the time. After she woke up, you told her that you saved her and deliberately concealed the matter of the 2 firefighters. Because it was too chaotic back then, you all left and went to the Haicheng orphanage, and you have kept this matter a secret. You are just afraid that she will leave you. So you keep using this incident to make her feel grateful and guilty towards you. Brian's mother was stunned. What? How is it possible? My son would not lie. We have found the 2 firefighters. Do you want to bring them to talk to your son? The uncle said coldly. My father took a few steps forward and said in a deep voice, my daughter originally didn't want me to come here today, but I came here to tell you a few words about the Hall family. Lauren is my daughter. During the years she has been living away from home, I have prayed countless times, hoping that my daughter can meet a good person who loves her. Brian, maybe you really wanted to save Lauren at the risk of your own life. As a father, I thank you, but don't you know how your Hall family treated my daughter over the years? Our Perez family motto has always been to be lenient to others, and Lauren has inherited this. She knows how to repay a favor, is sensible, and is kind. But that's no reason for you to lie to her and bully her. If the Hall family really wants to discuss this matter, then let's sit down and discuss everything that happened over the years. How did you bully my daughter and even prevent her from finding a job? Do you really think we don't know this now? No, that's not the case. Brian's mother cried. She is not in good health. Brian wants to protect her and let her rest at home, so he doesn't let her work. Not feeling well? Matthew and Samuel came in. My sister has been feeling very well since she came home. We also want to know what kind of tortured relationship could cause her already healthy body to have frequent problems. Samuel turned around and faced Brian. Brian, you have always been afraid to face the truth because you have always been a cowardly and fearful coward. I'm afraid that even if I break her wings, I still can't keep her and I'm not worthy of her. But she was never a bird that could be caged. How can a hawk soaring in the sky be contained in a cage? I was silent for a moment and walked forward. Brian, stop playing with your life. This is the last time I'm here. Next time, whether you live or die, it has nothing to do with me anymore. Goodbye. I turned and left. Brian's mother fell to the ground, muttering how this could happen, and Brian sat on the bed in a daze until we left. 21. After that, I arranged for my company's public relations department to suppress the gossip media's groundless reports about Brian and me and issued a statement. The Hall family tried to contact the Perez family several times, but my family and I ignored them. I was busy learning the management of Perez's companies and took on some small businesses. Just like when you break a piece of ice and see the vast ocean you can swim in, the first success is often followed by the second and third successes. I don't try to please anyone, I just do my best. Gradually, I saw heartfelt respect and recognition on the faces of everyone in the company. I don't want to be a little princess in a greenhouse. What I want to be is a Mr. Liu, who can stand on his own. So what if I changed my career lately? So what if I'm a girl? I accept new challenges nervously and excitedly, striving to stand on a higher peak. I am grateful to my parents and relatives. They love me unconditionally, help me, and make me a better person than I ever thought possible. Of course, there's that guy. That night, Samuel asked me to go to the basketball court. I can now shoot 3-pointers. When the two were resting on the sidelines of the court, he produced a bunch of fiery red flowers from nowhere. Actually, I've always wanted to tell you, he said, looking a little nervous. You see, your name and my sister's name are quite compatible. Sheen and Lauren. Together they mean the voice of the heart, just like a family. Ah, he sighed. I know this confession might be a little cliché, but it's my first time confessing to a girl, and it took me several days to come up with it. I stared at him blankly. Come to think of it, I was the one who secretly helped your cousin to trick my sister into being with him. At that time, I didn't really understand what love was, and I couldn't understand why your brother waited for my sister for so long. This time it was my turn, and I realized that love is not something that can be controlled, so you're going to trick my sister too? Samuel and I both froze and looked in the direction of the sound. Matthew and Emily also arrived at the side of the court at some point. No, brother, I'm just confessing my feelings. How could you interrupt me like that? You are repaying kindness with ingratitude. Samuel said angrily. When my sister was with you, I contributed so much. He continued. Yeah, Matthew came over. It's not thanks to you that Sheen and I missed so many years before we were together. Damn, this isn't the way to hold a grudge. No matter what, I have to be responsible for my sister. Matthew came over and said, Brother, let me say a few words to you first. Lauren, I know Samuel quite well. Samuel. Although he may seem unreliable and unreasonable at times, he is indeed a very protective person and a trustworthy person. You're pretty reasonable. But you still have to think carefully about relationships, Matthew said. Especially when it comes to accepting a proposal. You have to be more cautious. Samuel. It's better not to agree too quickly. It's not impossible to let him wait a little longer. Matthew. Samuel raised his fist. But the next second he turned to me again, pitifully. Lauren, my stomach hurts. Ah. I was startled and was about to step forward, but was suddenly stopped by Matthew. You're trying to trick my sister right in front of me. Do you think I don't exist? And please don't steal my lines. Matthew folded his hands over his chest. Stomachache is the specialty of CEOs like us. Can't you be more innovative? Samuel jumped up in anger. No, which overbearing president doesn't have stomachaches? I'm sunny, cheerful, lively, and enthusiastic, but I can also have these diseases. I looked at the two people arguing with each other and suddenly laughed. Thank you, brother. I turned and looked at Samuel. Samuel, I used to be hesitant and had no confidence in myself. But just like you taught me to play basketball, I always had to bravely raise the ball and try before I could throw it into the basket, right? A good partner will not let you stay where you are with him, nor will he trap you in a cage, but will move forward with you side by side. So, I think so too. I smiled. From what I heard, it really feels like we are a family. 22. That night at the basketball court, Samuel set off a lot of fireworks. I leaned quietly on his shoulder, watching the sky dyed with brilliant colors. When Matthew and Emily were about to leave, Samuel put his hands in his pockets and called Matthew. One more thing I haven't mentioned yet. What are you going to do about the hall company? I didn't intend to pay any more attention to the clown, but if I don't teach him a lesson, I'm afraid he won't learn his lesson and it will be annoying in the future. A lesson? Matthew looked up and looked at the sky. The wind is picking up. He said softly. How about that? The two stood side by side and looked up at the sky together. Let Hall go bankrupt? At this moment, Emily on the side suddenly twitched her mouth. She came over and whispered, My husband has recently started reading male-oriented novels, and my brother seems to be reading them too. When they have nothing to do, they share their thoughts and experiences about reading. What should I do? Now this has even started. We looked at each other and smiled at the same time. The president who reads novels. How scary. 23. Hall's financial scandal quickly became a hot topic. During the investigation into Hall, more problems were discovered, including counterfeit goods and inferior products being exposed one after another. Hall's capital chain was broken and no bank was willing to lend them money anymore. "If you do too much evil, you will eventually perish," Samuel said with emotion. "Matthew and I are just exposing the good things that Hall has done over the years. Their fate will naturally be determined by the consumers they deceived." I occasionally hear from Brian and Julia from my former college classmates. After the Hall family fell into trouble, all of Brian's good brothers broke off relations with him, and everyone was afraid of him coming to borrow money. Julia and Brian broke up. On the one hand, Hall accused her of stealing company secrets, and on the other hand, several boys' girlfriends jointly exposed her ambiguous chat records with the boys. This matter caused quite a big stir. One of the girls was a bit extreme and directly hired someone to beat her up. Julia's face was disfigured, and she is still suing that girl. But these have nothing to do with me anymore. Samuel and I are preparing for our wedding. One day, I parked my car on the side of the road to buy something. When I came out, I saw a girl looking around in front of my car. She felt a little embarrassed when she saw me coming. "Sister, I really like your car, but if I drive it, will people say I'm not like a girl?" I smiled and said, "If you like it, why do you care what others think?" She struggled. "Because when socializing, you always have to consider the issue of fitting in." I shook my head. "When it comes to socializing, you should first consider making yourself comfortable. It is better to please yourself than to please others." I smiled and said, "This car is very comfortable and cool. Do you want to sit in it and feel it?" Her eyes lit up, and after thinking for a while, she shook her head. "No need, sister, I will save enough money next month and buy one myself." After the girl left, I received a message from Samuel. "You said, should I use my name Howren for our wedding ceremony? Shu Howren seems more like an idle drama. He has been brooding over this for days." "No need, I just like the word lay, it means hard," I replied. After a while the information came. He replied, "Thank you for the compliment, madam. For my husband. I will not bring disgrace to my name." I burst out laughing. Looking up, the sunset is just right. Today and tomorrow will be good weather.